there. I'm Cindy Linden, and this is a Cookalong Podcast Quick Bite. If you listen regularly to the Cookalong Podcast, you will have heard a ton of interesting tips that I throw in as I'm cooking. And I thought it was time to do another Cindy's Secrets. This will be the second one of these I've done. I'm trying to keep just a few secret tips in each one so as not to overwhelm you and have you forgetting the first ones when you hear the last ones. So just a few today, mostly connected to lemon, citrus. I have in my freezer ice cubes made of lime juice. I have some of lemon juice, and I have some of buttermilk. That means that I squeezed a bunch of those fruits, or I had buttermilk that was about to go bad that I didn't know how I was going to use it. Or half and half, since sometimes you might buy a little carton of half and half to use in a recipe, and then you don't know what to do with the rest of it, but some other recipe day you'll need it. And I poured those things into individual ice cube trays and froze them. And then popped them out of the trays and put them in plastic bags that I labeled carefully so I knew what they were. And I have them in my freezer for me to use whenever I have a recipe that says that it needs fresh lemon juice, or a drink perhaps like a margarita that needs fresh lime juice, or a sauce or a batter or a creme fraiche or anything that needs buttermilk. It's in your freezer. If it needs to be liquid, you defrost it. In a creme fraiche, you don't even have to do that. You just throw it in there, although that will make it take a little bit longer because you're starting with something frozen. It just so happens that if you wanted to make your own creme fraiche, you could find a recipe for that in a Cookalong Podcast Quick Bite called Creme Fraiche. It's easy to do. It just takes a little time and patience, but it's very rewarding. I also do that with pesto, either leftover or just intentionally. I freeze it in ice cube trays, and then I have these little bricks of pesto that I can use randomly throughout the year. An ice cube is about 2 tablespoons of whatever you've put in it. Very handy to have. They'll keep indefinitely. It might be worth actually making a plan to get those things into your freezer. Speaking of fruits that you're going to juice, if you're going to juice a lime, a lemon, or an orange, it will juice better if you cut off the bumpy part of the end. The lemons and limes in particular, they have one end that's usually got a bump on it. When you try to juice that, it's going to get in the way, and the juicer won't be able to effectively do its job. But if you cut that flat before you start, then no matter what kind of juicer you're using, you will get more of the juice out. So just trim off that bumpy spot before you do it. Speaking again of lemons, this is going to sound weird, but if you roast lemons before you make lemonade out of them, this is assuming that you like making fresh lemonade, you roast them first before you squeeze them, and it will make the lemons sweeter and less tart. So you cut them in half and you roast them at 400 for 20 to 30 minutes. That's a preheated oven until they're brown and just kind of starting to look a little charred. And then you cool them and you make your lemonade as usual, but don't put in as much sweetener as you usually do. If it's simple syrup, just put in like half and then taste it, because you've released enough sugar in the lemon that you may not need as much sweetener in it. And then you can always add more later, but if you get it too sweet, you can't undo that, right? And by the way, maple syrup, if you don't want to bother with making simple syrup and you have real maple syrup in the house, just replace your simple syrup with maple syrup. I learned that from my whiskey sour recipe, actually, which you can find on my website, thecookalongpodcast.com, that replacing simple syrup with maple syrup is simple. It's always in my house, in my refrigerator. The real stuff you have to keep refrigerated. And it adds this kind of interesting dimension to your drinks without being really obvious about what it is. I mean, it doesn't taste like maple. It just tastes sweet, but it adds this kind of extra richness. So you could consider doing that instead of simple syrup. I don't make that stuff at all anymore. It's always either too sweet or just not sweet enough. And I like the texture and the richness of the maple syrup better. So why bother with that other stuff? Please go forth and use my tips. And until next time, happy cooking!